Gra.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Today is the traditional date, but remembered in 753 BC, when Rome starts off rising in the imagination of the ancient world. And it's the story of two brothers. Their lives are intertwined in numerous things: violence, destiny, divine intrigue, but it has come to shape the church and the West, and frankly, the very structure of human thought. And so I want to talk about this. According to Roman foundation mythology, these brothers were twins, Romulus and Remus. They entered human history through a union between a mortal woman and a Roman idol. Now that itself, if we pay attention to it, already reveals the religious instinct of the Roman mind. Their mother, Rhea Silvia, was a Vestal virgin. Their father is said to be Mars, the Roman idol of war. His Greek counterpart was Ares. What this points to us is that from the beginning, Rome links human bloodline with divinity, and that itself is a bit of a precursor to the anticipation of God becoming man. The story begins with King Amulius. Once the twins have been conceived and given birth to, he orders the infants to be cast into the river Tiber so that no rival might threaten his rule, because these two sons of the idol Mars could well rise up, becoming demigods and therefore challenging his kingship. But somehow the providence of the gods of Rome works through strange instruments, and so the river deposits the children along its banks, and a she-wolf discovers them. And rather than eat them up, the she-wolf takes them home and nurses them, raises them as her own, until a shepherd named Faustulus rescues them and raises them into manhood. As the brothers grow into strength, they learn of their origins and they reclaim their lineage. They make a few decisive actions. They overthrow Amulius, they restore their grandfather Numitor, and then they seek to establish the kingdom as a city of their own. And of course, in the establishment of the city, the two brothers fight. Their names are Romulus and Remus, so you can pretty much surmise which one of them won. Romulus won, and that's why it's called Rome. If Remus had won, we'd be remembering the city as Rheims. Now, the reason why I point all of this out is because Roman religion from its earliest phases relies heavily on the concept of discerning the will of the gods, especially through signs in nature. Once again, you've got these pre-Christian appeals to divine providence, the hand of God. Romulus claims the favor of heaven through superior actions and desires. Remus mocks his brother, and he leaps over the walls of the new city. And the narrative tells us that Romulus kills Remus in that moment. And so the city, in that sense, has its foundation in fratricide, brotherly bloodshed. Once again, the murder of Christ by all of us sinners is, in fact, fratricide in its worst manifestation. And so, again, you see these pre-Christian threads that beg for the culminating work of salvation history. But from that act of Romulus killing Remus, Rome is founded, like I mentioned, through fratricide, but consecrated through different rituals. Romulus establishes political structures and religious rites and military priorities. Now these, in the ancient world, defined Rome as a civilization rather than just a tyrannical empire. Romulus, in that sense, was a bit of a god king, but there was a sense of a republic here. And so the myth reflects the Roman worldview. Religion, politics, and warfare are bound. Single unified vision, life under the authority of order and divine forces. And so Roman religion develops that way. It's a ritualistic system, but it emphasizes duty. And that's key here. That was one of the driving forces of the growth of the Roman Empire. The Romans worship a vast pantheon. These include people like Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and countless lesser deities. But they also maintained household gods, household idols. They were called Lares and Penates, and these were supposed to guard the family and sustain daily life. Roman priests served as officials of the state. They were not isolated mystics. All of this is crucial because we need to understand that this whole notion of removing God from the public sphere is an extremely novel phenomenon in human history. Now, from all of these foundations, Rome expands gradually, initially, through military discipline and strategic alliances. But its rulers had relentless ambition that was inherited generation by generation. And therefore, through centuries of warfare, Rome absorbed neighboring tribes, it consolidated the entire Italian peninsula, and eventually it confronted powerful rivals, like Carthage, for example. It defeated Carthage through the Punic Wars, and thereby it secured dominance over the entire western Mediterranean. Rome then transitioned from republic, which still had a concept of separation of powers and a delineation of powers, to empire. And it was really Augustus that sealed that deal. Julius before him had been given the consolidation of powers, but Augustus presents himself as the real first god king, so to speak, the Caesar, Augustus Caesar. And he achieves, however, unprecedented unity in his kingdom across vast territories. No one in history, no empire in history, had achieved what Augustus achieved at that point. And then he established infrastructures, things that Christianity was grateful for. I mean, these include things like the Roman roads, legal systems, administrative networks. These developments created the conditions that later served as instruments within divine providence for the spread of the gospel. Now, at this point, a modern cultural observation might even make a small joke about male fascination with Rome, and this is why. There was a viral question going around. It was a bit of a meme question, as I was made aware of, where women were asking the men in their lives how often they think about the Roman Empire. Now, this was sprung on me one day after work. I was sitting down and spending time with my bride, and she looked at me and said, and she'd been waiting all day to ask me this question. She looked at me and asked, "Honey, how often do you think about the Roman Empire?" I looked at her, and I guess largely without skipping a beat, I said, "Well, every day, I guess. I'm a covenant theologian and a biblical theologian, so I think about the Roman Empire, quite frankly, every day. And also as a culture commentator in the work I do here." And she just burst out laughing. I mean, I replied without hesitation, and she burst out laughing with genuine delight. And it turns out that most, if not all men who have some savvy of history in the West think about the Roman Empire with some significance. And there's a reason why. That reaction is an indicator of an intuitive recognition. Rome represents something enduring within the Western human psyche. Rome gave us concepts of power and order and law that were just, ambition on a scale that was unmatched in history up till that point. And so the Roman Empire continues to captivate the imagination of men who perceive in it what human greatness can accomplish, but also the great fragility of not preserving it. But as Christians, we also must go further. We must think about the Roman Empire and examine how divine providence operates through this pagan empire in preparation for the incarnation of the Son of God. Because long before the birth of Christ, Rome established a unified political structure. They called it the Pax Romani or Pax Romana, either the peace of Rome or the Roman peace, both those versions, which brings relative peace across its territories and enables safe travel and communication, cultural and commercial exchange. This was established largely by military force, but secondarily by means of legislative and societal culture. When Christ enters history during the reign of Augustus, the Roman world had a linguistic and political and logistical framework that facilitated Christ's public ministry and eventual proclamation. The relative safety with which Jesus and his apostles traveled across the regions, a lot of that is owed to Rome. Greek and Aramaic, because of the Persian Empire, Aramaic, and the Macedonian Empire, Greek, created common languages across the eastern Mediterranean. And therefore, Jesus and the apostles were conversant in Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek. And the Roman roads allowed for efficient movement between cities and regions. Rome preserved those languages for the sake of this diversity of culture and commerce. Think about the legal system that Rome had as well. It played a role in the Passion of our Lord. The crucifixion is a Roman method of execution, and today it is the great sign of our salvation. Now, don't get me wrong, I could go on, but I want to challenge you. We Catholics must thank God for God working in the pagan Roman Empire, because that paved the way for the Roman roads that Paul eventually used and the commercial routes that spread the gospel to the ends of the earth. Thank the Lord for his thumbprint throughout history. Stay tuned, I'm Marcus Peter.